Marcus was the kind of man people rarely noticed, though his kindness shone brightly in everything he did. He had moved to the city a few months ago, excited for a fresh start and a chance to build a new life. After a long search, he landed a job at a well-known company, hoping it would bring him stability and maybe even a few friends. But from his first day, Marcus realized he didn't fit in. The office was bustling with energy, laughing coworkers, coffee cups clinking, and casual chatter filling the air. Yet Marcus felt like a ghost moving through the building. People barely looked at him when he greeted them in the morning. They avoided sitting near him during meetings, and in the cafeteria, the tables around him always seemed full while his remained empty. At first, Marcus thought it was just his imagination. But as the days turned into weeks, the reality became undeniable. It wasn't just that they didn't talk to him, it was as if they didn't even see him. When he shared ideas during team meetings, they were ignored. When he tried to join conversations, they fizzled out awkwardly. Still, Marcus kept a smile on his face. He believed in treating people with kindness, even if they didn't return it. Every morning, he held the door open for others, even when they walked past without a thank you. He helped coworkers carry heavy files, only to be met with a mumbled acknowledgement. One rainy afternoon, Marcus stayed late to finish a project. As he passed the break room on his way out, he overheard a group of his coworkers laughing and chatting. One of them, Claire, was sharing a funny story about her weekend. Marcus smiled, thinking about joining in, but as soon as he walked in, the laughter stopped. Hey, Marcus," Claire said, looking awkwardly at her phone. "Hey," he replied, his voice warm but hesitant. The room grew uncomfortably quiet, and Marcus felt the weight of their stares. They weren't rude, but their silence said enough. He turned and left, his heart heavy but his resolve unbroken. Hook, the unexpected encounter. A few days later, as Marcus walked home from work, the streets were unusually quiet. The sun had just set, painting the sky in hues of deep orange and purple. He took his usual route through a side street, his thoughts occupied with the day's events. Up ahead, he noticed a familiar face, Claire, one of his coworkers. She was walking briskly, her purse clutched tightly against her side. Marcus hesitated for a moment, debating whether to say hello. Before he could decide, something caught his attention. Out of the shadows, a figure emerged. A man in a dark hoodie moved quickly toward Claire, his movements sharp and deliberate. Marcus's heart skipped a beat as he realized what was happening. The man grabbed Claire's purse, yanking it hard. She screamed, struggling to hold onto it. "Let go," she cried, her voice echoing through the empty street. Marcus's instincts kicked in. Without thinking, he sprinted toward them, his footsteps pounding against the pavement. "Hey, leave her alone," he shouted, his voice firm and commanding. The robber turned, his face partially obscured by the hood. He held a knife, the blade glinting under the dim streetlight. Marcus felt a surge of fear, but he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. Suspense and action. Claire froze, her eyes wide with terror. The robber snarled, pointing the knife at Marcus. "Stay back or I'll..." But Marcus didn't let him finish. He lunged at the man, grabbing his arm and trying to wrestle the weapon away. The two struggled fiercely, the sound of their scuffle filling the air. Claire watched, paralyzed with fear, as Marcus put himself in harm's way for her. The robber managed to slice Marcus's side, but Marcus didn't back down. With a burst of strength, he knocked the knife out of the man's hand and tackled him to the ground. The robber squirmed and cursed, but Marcus held him down, his face contorted with determination and pain. "Call the police," Marcus shouted, his voice strained. Claire snapped out of her shock and fumbled for her phone, dialing with trembling fingers. The sound of sirens in the distance brought a wave of relief, but Marcus's strength was fading. Blood seeped through his shirt, staining it a deep red. By the time the police arrived, Marcus was barely conscious. Officers apprehended the robber, but all Claire could focus on was Marcus lying on the ground, his breathing shallow. "Are you okay?" she whispered, kneeling beside him. Marcus gave her a weak smile. "You're safe. That's all that matters." Her heart sank. This was the man she and her coworkers had ignored, dismissed, and undervalued. Yet here he was, risking his life for her without a second thought. The next morning, the office felt different. It wasn't the usual hustle and bustle, nor the muted greetings exchanged by distracted coworkers. Instead, there was a strange quietness, a weight in the air that everyone seemed to feel. Claire had arrived early, her mind still replaying the events of the previous evening. The image of Marcus lying injured on the street, his blood staining the pavement, was burned into her memory. She couldn't believe how blind she and everyone else had been to the kind of person Marcus truly was. She stood in the middle of the office, gathering her courage. It wasn't easy, but she knew she had to speak up. "Everyone, can I have your attention?" she called out, her voice trembling slightly but growing stronger with each word. Her coworkers looked up from their desks, surprised to see Claire so serious. A few of them even set down their coffee cups, sensing this wasn't a typical morning announcement. "Something happened last night," Claire began, her voice steady now. "I was walking home when I was attacked by a robber. He had a knife, and I honestly thought..." Her voice broke for a moment, and she took a deep breath. "I thought I wouldn't make it out alive." Gasps filled the room. "But someone saved me," she continued. Someone who didn't think twice about running toward danger, even though it meant risking his own life. That someone was Marcus? A heavy silence followed her words. Eyes widened, mouths hung open. The emotional shift. "Marcus?" a coworker blurted out, as though the very idea was impossible. "Yes," Claire said firmly, her voice filled with both guilt and pride. "The same Marcus we've all ignored, overlooked, and avoided. While we were too busy judging him, he was willing to put his life on the line for someone who didn't even treat him like a friend." She paused, letting her words sink in. "He's in the hospital now because of what he did for me. He's hurt because of his bravery. And I think we owe him more than just a thank you. We owe him our respect." The room was still quiet, but this time it wasn't awkward. It was thoughtful. People exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from shock to shame. Marcus, the man they had all dismissed, had shown more courage and kindness than any of them ever had. The welcome back. By the afternoon, a group of co-workers, led by Claire, had organized a plan. They pooled money to buy flowers, balloons, and a big banner that read, "Welcome back, Marcus." They even decided to throw a surprise welcome party at the office. When Marcus woke up in the hospital, he was surprised to see Claire sitting by his bedside. She looked different. Not just because her makeup had run from crying, but because her eyes were filled with genuine gratitude. "Marcus," she began, her voice soft but sincere, "I don't even know how to thank you. You saved my life. I'm so sorry for the way I treated you, how we all treated you. It wasn't fair. You didn't deserve it." Marcus smiled weakly. "You don't need to apologize, Claire. I just did what anyone would have done." Her eyes brimmed with tears. "No, Marcus. Not anyone. You risked everything for someone who didn't even deserve your kindness. That makes you a better person than most of us. A twist of fate." When Marcus was discharged from the hospital a few days later, he expected to quietly slip back into the office, just as invisible as he'd always been. But as he walked through the doors, he was met with cheers, applause, and the sight of his coworkers gathered around, clapping and holding a huge banner that read, "Welcome back, Marcus." He froze, unsure of what was happening. Claire stepped forward, a bouquet of flowers in her hands. "This is for you," she said with a smile. "It's not nearly enough to thank you for what you did, but we hope it shows how much we appreciate you." One by one his coworkers approached him, shaking his hand and offering heartfelt apologies and words of gratitude. The same people who had once avoided eye contact were now looking him directly in the eye, their expressions filled with respect. The ultimate realization. During the celebration, the office manager, Mr. Reynolds, stood up to address everyone. "Marcus," he said, his tone warm and sincere, "you've reminded us all of what really matters. Not status, not appearances, but character. You've shown us the power of humility and courage, and we're lucky to have you as part of this team." Marcus felt a lump in his throat. For so long he had worked quietly, never expecting recognition or praise. And now, standing in the center of the room, surrounded by people who finally saw him for who he was, he felt something he hadn't in a long time: belonging. As the party continued, Marcus couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought him here. He had faced prejudice, isolation, and indifference, but he had never let it harden his heart. His kindness had been his strength, and in the end, it had changed not only his life but also the lives of those around him. A changed office. From that day on, the office was never the same. People went out of their way to include Marcus, to listen to his ideas, and to show him the respect he had always deserved. But more than that, they began to treat each other with more kindness and understanding, inspired by the man who had quietly taught them the most important lesson of all, that true strength lies in compassion. And as Marcus walked through the office each morning, greeted by warm smiles and genuine hellos, he knew he had finally found a place where he belonged, not because of what he did, but because of who he was.